When you stop yourself from doing stuff because your mind is telling you what you can and can't do, or what you should and shouldn't do you ever wonder where those rules came from? That's what this episode is about. You're listening to Pure Light, where we explore how you can believe in yourself and be happy with who you are so that you feel worthy of your craziest dreams and confident in your power to make them happen. My name is Ailey. I'm a coach, writer, and Kundalini Yoga and meditation teacher. This is episode 98, and it's part of a series of episodes about the rules inside your head. So if you're just joining, you can find them all at purelightpodcast.com. So when you operate based on the rules inside your head, it means that you're trying to force yourself to be a certain way. You're trying to conform to the expectations you have about who you should be, which means that at some level, you are not allowing yourself to be who you are. Because the ideas in your head are more important to you than the truth of your experience. Or to say that another way, the mental concepts you have about who you think you should be are more important to you than your feelings. It means that you have some beliefs about how you should be, and that you want to uphold those more than you want to just let yourself be who you are. I know it can be really frustrating when you get caught up in listening to the rules inside your head, and it can be exhausting to try to fight them. And it's useful to ask yourself, where did they come from? Like, where did this idea come from that I have to be this way or act this way? Because then you can see whether or not it's really yours and if you want to keep it. So you can make a conscious choice as to whether or not you want to follow it. So where did those ideas come from? They come from a couple of different places, and I've bucketed them into 4 different categories of things that contribute to the rules inside your head. There's some overlap between them, and I don't know that this is all inclusive, but it'll at least give you some food for thought. And I'm also going to talk about some of the underlying assumptions in these buckets or categories of rules. And again, this is all just so that you can decide whether or not you want to keep operating based on them. So the first category is the desire to belong. So this is about wanting to fit in, wanting to be normal, or wanting to be one of the cool kids, like if you think back to high school or potentially even later. So this includes things like, feeling like you have to fit the mold, whatever that mold may be, because it does depend on who you have around you or what culture you're within. This also includes being motivated by things that shape the collective consciousness. So things like advertising and media and commercials and, what's considered normal or acceptable or ideal or attractive and what's not. And this really comes down to social norms. So within a culture as well as in microcultures. So it's about the expectations and assumptions that apply to groups of people, as well as to subsets of those groups. So you may have heard the quote, "You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." And that's because the people that you spend time with shape what's normal for you. So I just read an article that actually talks about a study that was done that showed that the circle of influence extends way beyond the 5 people that are closest to you. It actually showed that friends of friends of friends can shape your perception of what's normal. And if you think about what's normal, that's really how we define conventional wisdom. It's how we define, what a certain path should look like or what a life should look like. And I've talked about trying to be normal in a couple of previous episodes. So I'll put the links to those in the show notes if you want to go back and listen to them. But some of the rules in this category might sound like, I can't do that. That's crazy. I can't do that. That's not normal. So the underlying assumptions here are, I have to be normal to belong. This is the way it is, or this is the way that things are. And there's only one acceptable way to be. So the next category that I'm going to talk about is the rules that come from wanting to be perfect. So the first category was about being normal and fitting in. This one is about exceeding that. It's about wanting to be better than others and wanting to be superior in some way. So this is really about your ego. And I would also say it's about wanting to not be human in a way, because it's about trying to protect yourself from being vulnerable and risking exposure or failure or rejection. So rules in this category often involve trying to project a certain image, which means that you're trying to control what people think of you. So it might be stuff like, I can't show this part of myself because then people will know I'm a fraud. People will know I'm a failure. People will know that there's something wrong with me. So it also involves not wanting to reveal a quality that may not be ideal or that may not fit in. And it's also about trying to avoid judgment or criticism. So I talked about this in a previous episode when I realized that I had a belief that I shouldn't repeat myself because of the fear of being criticized for that. So again, the rules here are about living up to an ideal and exceeding it, which is based on cultural conditioning. So it's very much related to the first category. And it's also about preventing people from finding out that there's something wrong with you or that you don't belong. So the rules here might sound like, I can't say that. That's stupid. I can't do that. I need to be strong. Or I can't do this because then they'll think that, and then I won't fit in, and then I'll be rejected and all that kind of stuff. So some of the underlying assumptions here are, I'm not enough as I am. I need to prove that I'm enough. Other people's opinions of me are more important than my own. And I need other people to like me and validate me. And then the third category of things that contribute to the rules inside your head is past experience. Although I'll say that I think all of these categories ultimately come from that. In this context, what I mean is it's about avoiding a negative experience or consequence. So it's about trying to control things to prevent bad things from happening and only allow good things to happen. So a rule here might sound something like, this bad thing happened to me when I did this thing once, so I'm never doing that again. I don't want to risk it. I don't want to be vulnerable. It also might sound something like, I can't do this. I failed before. So it's about trying to protect yourself from failure or an experience that you don't want to have. And this is also related to wanting to be perfect. So it's related to the previous category. And some of the underlying assumptions here are that the future will be the same as the past, that there's no possibility of any alternate ending, and that everything will always be this way. And then the last category of things that contribute to the rules inside your head is who you think you are. So this is really about your identity, your sense of self, or your self-image, because all of those are key drivers for the rules inside your head. A couple of episodes back, I talked about how the rules inside your head are actually useful because they reveal your beliefs about who you think you should be. And those beliefs are sometimes unconscious. Even though they can make you really angry and frustrated with yourself, it's ironic because sometimes we're not even aware of them. So it's actually a gift to figure out who you think you should be. So when things happen in your life, the mind adopts an idea about who you are based on the story you tell yourself about what happens. And then that becomes part of your self-concept or how you think about yourself. And then that informs the decisions that you make. And so whatever you think about yourself is ultimately going to fuel what you allow yourself to do. And one part of this is that you might actually reject parts of yourself because they contradict with others. So when an idea becomes part of your sense of self, it defines how you show up in the world, and it eliminates possibilities. Because when you think you're something, it means that you also think that you're not the opposite of that. So the rules then involve, not wanting to contradict yourself. So it's basically any version of I am this, so I can't be that. So for example, I am logical, so I can't be creative. So this is about not being able to hold space for conflicting aspects of your identity by looking at it as an either or proposition instead of a both and. And I've talked about this in a couple of previous episodes, so I'll include links to those in the show notes. And then the other part of this category, the other part of who you think you are and the rules that come from that, is related to the roles that you play. So in terms of sociology, a role is defined as the rights, obligations, and expected behavior patterns associated with a particular social status. So when you think about whatever words you put after the words I am, especially in terms of the roles that you play, so things like being a student, a teacher, a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, lawyer, nurse, doctor, engineer, actor, whatever that may be, whenever you take on a role like that, you take on the expectations that come with that role. So this is about unspoken assumptions and expectations. And these are shaped by the collective consciousness or social norms. So again, they circle back to some of the other categories. So for the rules related to who you think you are, the underlying assumptions are along the lines of, I am this, so I can't be that. I am this role, so I have to be this way. And actually, to build on that one, there's also an underlying assumption that there's only one acceptable expression or way of showing up for this role. So there's a video where Oprah and Eckhart Tolle talk about how to tell if you're playing a role or being yourself. And the distinction is in how you show up. It's in the quality of your interactions and communications and presence, which ultimately has to do with how much you identify with the roles. I'll include a link to that video in the show notes, which you can find at purelightpodcast.com. So the one thing that all of these sources of rules inside your head have in common is that they all come from ideas you've adopted in the past. And these ideas may have been adopted consciously or unconsciously. But regardless of how they came to you, as soon as you're aware of them, you have a choice as to whether or not you want to follow them. You feed these ideas every time you act in alignment with them. You give power to the idea that you should be that way every time you make a choice that reinforces that belief, because you're operating under the assumption that it's true. You have the power to break free from the rules inside your head by choosing to act in a way that doesn't reinforce them. So you can stop contributing to the idea that you need to follow them simply by choosing not to. In the next episode, I'll talk more about how to break free from the rules inside your head. To make sure you get it, subscribe to Pure Light wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, may you be guided by your light.